Welcome to this Success Connection workshop on tips for effective argumentative writing. So I'm Michael Oishi, as Scott noted. I'm a professor of literature here at Leeward Community College. So I'd really like to begin this. I think this issues of argumentative writing cut across all kinds of disciplines. So what I'm hoping is that this is going to be useful. So no matter what you do, what course you're taking, or even in your personal life, right, or your career, right, effective argumentative writing is going to be valuable no matter what you do. So I think at the heart of argumentative writing is this idea of a thesis, right? So does anybody have any ideas? So I'm hoping this can be a little bit interactive. So based on your understanding, because I know that probably a lot of you have already taken composition classes, what's a thesis? What do you think a thesis is? Okay, it's a reason. Yeah, so I see that from Paula. Anything else? Any other ideas about what a thesis is? A theory, a claim. Yes, exactly. Thank you. So Malia's in my class. Yeah, so a kind of working definition or functional definition is just the central idea, right? Some kind of, we usually have in any given paper that we write, like a whole bunch of different ideas. But to make it understandable to an audience, to a reader, you really have to focus on one thing and then develop those ideas as you go through the paper, right? So it's a way to focus your many ideas. Oops, sorry. So along with this concept of a thesis is evidence, right? What is the purpose of evidence? Well, the way we can broadly conceive of it is that evidence is just information, but it's information that can be confirmed and verified, right? So, but it has a different function in argumentative papers, I think, right? So evidence is something that you can prove or disprove. It's also used to kind of confirm things like hypotheses, which are like working theories about how something works. And evidence is also frequently used to help people kind of develop ideas, right? To confirm ideas or positions that they take. So it also is important because it helps to establish credibility of a particular writer, right? It shows that you understand the material, that you've done your homework, and you've really thoroughly considered the issue, okay? So this gets us to this discussion about what an argument is. And for my students, right, I keep saying this like an ad nauseum, like all the time, like, make sure that your thesis is in fact an argument. So what's an argument? Well, basically it's a type of opinion, right? Now there's a difference between a statement of opinion and an argument, right? So an argument is an opinion, but one that you can prove, right, with logic and evidence, right? With an opinion, which is something I'm going to get to in a minute, you can't prove it, no matter how much evidence that you have. So when we're thinking about writing or crafting an argument, we also need to consider use of evidence, right, to support that claim. So one of the keys to consider when you're developing an argument. So when you craft an argument, you know, the idea is that you're supporting it with evidence. Now, the real acid test to think about this, right? So ask yourself, can the topic that you picked as your thesis, does it have two sides to it, right? You should be able to argue for and against it. If you don't have that, you probably don't have an argument, right? Now, one of the things to consider, and this is kind of why this particular workshop is useful for all kinds of different disciplines, there are different types of writing assignments, right? So you want to be clear about what it is that you're trying to write, what it is you're trying to produce. So for example, like if you're in a speech class, right, one of the assignments, and this also happens in composition class, like English 100 classes, you might be given an assignment that's what's called expository. Basically, you're just kind of summarizing like something that happens, right? So for example, I know a common assignment in speech classes is, you know, tell us like how something works. So you might, for example, write a paper about like how an SLR camera works, right? And it's just a series of facts, right, that you're kind of giving. That's not an argument. It's basically just a kind of summary, right? Now, that's fine. You just have to be clear about what type of assignment you're writing for, right? Because in some cases, not everything you write is going to be an argument, right? In some cases, you're just being asked to summarize. For example, in history classes, it's pretty common to have book reports. Same thing. You're just basically kind of summing up, kind of getting to the major issues that in the book, but you're not developing an argument per se, though you might be asked, depending on your instructor, for your particular opinion or perspective on it. Okay. So when you're developing an argument, it's really important to kind of beware of pitfalls, right? When you're crafting an argumentative claim, there are what are called like rhetorical dead ends, that if you follow one of these routes, you fall into one of these pitfalls or traps, you're going to have a hard time with the rest of your paper. Okay. So one of the important kind of pitfalls to try to avoid is something that I mentioned earlier. It's a statement of opinion. Okay. So as I said before, an argument is a statement of opinion, but it's different from a plain straight out opinion, because for a statement of opinion, they're too difficult to prove, right? It's just like, here's what I believe, and that's that. There's no amount of evidence that is required. Opinions aren't arguable because they're just too subjective, right? People can have varying perspectives on your opinion, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So something like this, like Cherry Garcia is Ben & Jerry's best flavor of ice cream, right? You can't really like argue against that. That's just how you feel. So there's no like two sides to this, right? So that's why I said earlier, if you want to know if you have an argument, right, for your paper, ask yourself if there are two sides to this issue. There's really no two sides to this one, right? Cherry Garcia is Ben & Jerry's best flavor of ice cream. That's just how somebody feels. Or even something like this, the MacBook Pro is a superior computer compared to the Dell Inspiron. Now, that's an opinion, but for this one, this is where it's important. I think for me as an instructor, I've seen things like this before. This is something, the second example about the MacBook Pro being a superior computer. That's something that actually you could tweak and make it into an argumentative claim, right? So for example, if you were to say something like the MacBook Pro is a more reliable computer compared to the Dell Inspiron, right? That's something that you can prove with evidence, right? You could look at fail rates, for example, right? How many times the MacBook Pro crashes versus the Dell Inspiron. That's an argument. You can prove that now. So when you're crafting a thesis, when you're looking to craft an argument, remember, so if you're told by your instructor that you have a statement of opinion, see if there's something that you can use from your original statement and see if you can tweak it into something that is argumentative. Okay. So don't throw the whole baby out with the bathwater. See if there's something that you can develop out of that idea that can help. Okay. So the other pitfall to be aware of, and this is something that I see a lot of, is what's called an obvious claim. Now, this is a lot of text, so don't worry about trying to read it all. Okay, I'm just going to go through it. The thing about an obvious claim is that it seems arguable, but the problem is that you just run out of evidence very quickly, right? The way to think about it, the other term for an obvious claim is a statement of near fact, right? And it's basically a statement of what's obvious, right? So for example, if somebody were to write this, as their thesis, the Catholic Church convicted Galileo Galilei of heresy for promoting the theory of heliocentrism, right? The idea that that the solar system kind of rotates around the sun, right? Well, look, that's just what happened, right? It's almost like saying it's cloudy out today, right? There's no like two sides to that. So you're not going to get very far, right? So that's why you want to be very careful about kind of really projecting ahead about what you're going to write about in a paper. So one thing that can help, and I'll return to this issue a little bit later, is write an outline. Now, outlines, I know that when I was in high school, I hated outlines because I thought they were just a waste of time. But really, if you spend a little bit of time up front with an outline, and it doesn't have to be really formal, you can save yourself a lot of headaches, and you can find out whether or not you fall into any of these pitfalls, right? Either an obvious claim or a statement of opinion. It would be better to find out in an outline than to write the full paper and then find out that you wrote a statement of opinion or you had an obvious claim and then have to rewrite the paper, right? So, but I'll come back to that issue about outlining. All right, so what in fact is an arguable claim? So basically, an arguable claim just attempts to convince readers of something, right? Possibly to change their mind about something or to urge them to think about an issue in a particular way or explore a topic in order to make some kind of wise decision, right? Ideally, the way to think about it too is that you're basically addressing a problem where there are no easy answers, right? And because of that, it requires a lot of proof or a lot of evidence, right? And that's valuable to a paper. Remember too that if you have like a word count, right, that's required, like a minimum word count, which is pretty common for a lot of papers. If you develop an argumentative claim, you're going to have you should have a lot of evidence to prove your claim, right? So you don't have to worry as much about meeting the word count. And one of the things that they'll also consider too, and I know that a lot of folks already kind of do this already in their argumentative papers, think ahead to what somebody who might disagree with you would say and how would you respond. So that's about anticipating what are called counter arguments, right? Somebody who disagrees with you, takes an exception to your particular position or stance. Think about what you would say to those people, right? And that way you some people think about that as a kind of weakness or a weak link in the paper. It's not. Okay, I think in fact, it makes the paper stronger if you can show why your ideas are better than somebody else's. So if you can build in responses to counter arguments, right, it really does make the paper stronger and your claim stronger. Okay, so let's actually just run through a couple of examples and think about like why these thesis statements are not good. So I'm saying kind of right off the bat that these are not good thesis statements, okay? Because remember, ask yourself whether you can argue for or against an issue. Okay, so take a look at some of these examples. So in this paper, I will discuss Julie Otsuka's use of the color white in her novel, When the Emperor Was Divine. So what's the problem with a thesis like this? Does anybody have any ideas here? Let's take a look at the chat. Right, no argument, no stance being taken, correct? So Pono and Carly, right? Exactly, you're just kind of noting that she does use the color white, right? There's no particular position being taken, right? Oops, and oops, sorry. And how about for this one? Julie Otsuka uses the color white in her novel When the Emperor Was Divine. What's the problem with this one? A little bit differently worded than the first one. What's the difference here, if anything? Yeah, again, so right, it's just a statement. Same thing, right? Be careful, right? Because sometimes we can kind of fool ourselves and thinking if we tweak the statement a little bit, then somehow it's more argumentative. Not necessarily, right? You have to really look at what it is that you're saying. What's the content? Right? So remember, and this is why it's really important to understand like what it is you're writing, right? So for an expository paper, you might be asked just to, for example, cite examples of Julie Otsuka's use of the color white, right? I've done that in high school, right? So some of you probably have done that your teacher might give you an assignment like, look at, an author's use of a particular like metaphor or something, and you just cite examples, right? And how the author does it. But it's not like an argument though, right? So an argument would explore something else about the color white. So it's not just a statement or general subject for a paper. So you have to get away from that particular idea, okay? And that will, to be honest, like when I was a student in college, that was one of the trickiest parts where I had to get away from some of the training I was given in high school and really kind of focus more on the difference between an argument and some kind of expository writing, okay? So you should, again, get back to basics. Ask yourself, can you argue either for or against the particular topic that you're introducing? Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple more examples. These two are not good thesis statements, and let's try to see why, discuss why they're not good thesis statements. So how about for this one? So Julia Tsuka prominently uses the color white in her novel When the Emperor Was Divine when describing the color of the mother's gloves. Why is this not a good thesis statement?
Is it a statement or opinion describing the color of a mother's glove?
No, not quite. Yeah, it's still no argument, right? It's just like, it's just an observation, right? That this is what she does. It's basically a statement of fact or an obvious claim, yeah? Yeah, no argument, still a statement, right? Exactly. And how about for this one? Julia Tsuka prominently uses the color white in her novel When the Emperor Was Divine when describing the color of the mother's gloves and the color of the family dog. What's the problem here? Same thing, exactly, right? So sometimes it's interesting when I ask questions with, or basically let's like variations on a theme, and I'll come up that some folks will have different answers, but really have to ask yourself, adding more detail to a sentence doesn't make it more arguable, okay? You really have to get down to the brass tacks. What the point are you trying to make, right? And you have to ask yourself, can you argue for or against it, right? Oops. So again, so just because something is more specific or has more detail, it doesn't make it more arguable. The issue is to ask why things happen. And in fact, that's the whole point of instructors assigning argumentative writing in college, right? Because they want to try and push you to critical thinking. Ask why things happen. Don't just summarize what happens, right? That's easy to do, right? That's actually more like rote exercise, right? But at the end of the day, you know, like years from now, you won't remember all the details anyway. What's really important is that you kind of develop a habit of mind asking why things happen. And this is going to serve you well, not just in argumentative writing, but in your lives, right? You know, you go out in the public, you know, there's some event that happens. What's the cause of that, right? Okay. So let's take a look at a good thesis, and let's try to figure out where it's going right in a way that the other four examples did not. Okay, so Julia Tsuka prominently uses the color white in her novel When the Emperor Was Divine to underscore the family's innocence and how that innocence was destroyed by the wartime incarceration of Japanese Americans. What's this example doing that the other ones did not do? Still same book, right, that we're talking about, right? Still about the color white. What's this doing differently? Yeah, so it gives you a reason, right? Anything else? Compares white to innocent, right? Yeah, and that, in fact, that's the reason, right? It's kind of linking ideas or things together, right? So, okay, so Julia Tsuka uses the color white. What's the point of that, right? In fact, let me take a look at the chat. Answers the why, exactly. Good, Malia, right? Right, so it kind of offers it a hypothesis, like what it is, why it is that Julia Tsuka is using this, right? Now, let's think about this. Let's kind of reconstruct it for ourselves. Like if you wrote this thesis, how How does white relate to innocence? What's the connection that the author seems to be making? Purity, right? Purity. So white is a kind of is a symbol. It's a type. You know, there are different types of symbols, right? It's what's called a conventional symbol, and for better or worse, it's associated with purity or goodness, right? So that's how she's making the connection. So in your paper, you're going to have to explain that, like, right? So that gives you a lot of opportunity to really develop an idea, right? Prove your claim, right? Why does she use white? Well, because she's trying to show the loss of innocence, right? That's lost. And this is an example of like what you would want to do, this of how you would want to approach a thesis, right? Oops. So when crafting a thesis, right, you want to be sure that you understand the goal of your writing task, right? Again, so make sure that you understand what it is you're trying to do, what you're being asked to do by your instructor, right? Are you trying to just describe something? If so, that's the expository, right? As I mentioned, if you're trying to prove or disprove a specific point, then that's an argument, right? And that's what it's really important to be clear, right? If you don't know what your assignment task is, ask your instructor, okay? So I know we have a couple of students in my class in this workshop. So FYI, everything you write is an argument, right? So everything you write is like, should be a claim. It has two sides. You're taking one side only, but you need to support it with evidence, right? Okay. Okay, so one thing to consider is that evidence, depending on the discipline you're in, will take different forms, right? The way we write in, say, for example, sociology is not the same way we write in, say, literature or in political science, right? Or in anthropology, or any number in philosophy, in any number of different disciplines or fields, okay? So it's important to understand like what types of evidence are appropriate depending on the field that you're writing in. So for example, scientific or historical evidence, if you're writing for like might be examples, things like the atomic number of gold is 79, right? Hawaii became an official US state on August 21st, 1959, like in a history class, right? Statistics, right? Nearly 6 out of 10 households own DVD players. I'm not sure this is even accurate. I need to update my slides here. Expert opinion, right, also counts as evidence, right? So many atmospheric and geological scientists believe that the Earth is experiencing a pattern of global warming due to the increased emission of greenhouse gases. Text-based evidence, right? So like for example, in like a literature class, like I teach, right? You could have something like, it's different type of evidence, right? It's not going to be like quantitative evidence necessarily. I've seen that in literature classes sometimes, but really it's more like textual evidence. What evidence in the text can you provide? So for example, like in the example of this, about F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, right? So in the conclusion to F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, Nick Carraway moves to the Midwest to avoid the materialism and superficiality associated with New York City. But you can actually go ahead and try and prove that, right, throughout the paper, right? Why does he move away? Because of all the nasty things he sees going on in New York, right? Okay, so here are examples of different types of evidence that are commonly accepted in, I'll just give 4 academic or professional disciplines, right? So if you're writing in biological sciences, there are arguments in sciences, right? So data from site studies or site surveys, they're just written up. So for like the sciences, you're just writing them up differently, like lab reports, right? For example, or some kind of experiment, you have to write it up. It's an argument, right, based on a hypothesis that you're giving. Observations of specimens with the aid of special equipment like a microscope, observations and measurements made in experimental settings, data from reports that other biologists have published. If you're thinking about a career in business or you're taking business classes, right? Things like reports, proposals, executive summaries, memos and correspondence, presentations, right? Brochures and newsletters, depending on what you're trying to prove. News articles, right? If you're in education or thinking about a career in education, different types of evidence here, right? So sometimes we don't even think about these as evidence, right? Reflective essays, journals, and field notes. Curriculum designs and lesson plans might even count as evidence, depending on what you're writing about. Reviews of instructional materials, case studies, research papers, self-evaluations, portfolios, academic journals, right? A lot in education too, there's something that's called assessment. Like, how do you know that students are actually learning what they're supposed to be learning, right? You do these assessments, right? That's also a type of evidence. Psychology, right? Quantitative evidence. Now, here's the important thing, like depending, especially in the social sciences, you can have quantitative evidence, right? Like statistics from case studies or experiments and surveys, but you can also have qualitative evidence, right? Descriptions of behavior, of physical appearance, or interview responses. It really is important to know like what discipline or what subset of a discipline you're writing in. I'll give you an example that's kind of similar to this one about psychology. If you're in anthropology, there are different types of anthropological studies, right? There is, for example, like biological anthropology class that we have here, but also there's like a cultural anthropology. The type of evidence you provide in a cultural anthropology class is going to be different generally than the kinds that you provide in a biological anthropology class, right? The biological is going to be more science-based. They're going to expect probably more quantitative evidence, as opposed to the cultural is going to be more descriptive and qualitative. Okay. Now, okay, so one thing here, so my students have heard me talk about this before, but if you take nothing away from this workshop, I hope you take two things away. One, the whole discussion about what a thesis is, and then this issue about topic sentences, right? This is quite possibly one of the most important things I can possibly leave you with about how to write a good argumentative paper. Topic sentences are key, okay? Now, remember, like when you're writing a paper, there's a whole bunch of different details that you're going to be providing, right? Now, what topic sentences are, the way you can think about them, they're like mini thesis statements, but for a particular body paragraph, right? So for each paragraph that you write, you should have a point that you're trying to be making, a sub-claim, right? So it's not just like a list of examples, right? You're actually trying to make a point, a different point in each paragraph, okay? So basically what topic sentences do is that they restate in portion or with more specificity the claim of your paper. So it's kind of like I said, it's like a mini thesis, but it's more the thesis for that particular body paragraph. It makes a claim. It should make a claim of some sort, right? So it should have like two sides to it. Basically, though, it's just that something that you expand upon or explicate or prove the major claim, which is your thesis, right? So because they're arguments or claims, or they should be topic sentences, they have a point to make, right? And they give reasons for that support, right? So basically, the way you want to think about them, topic sentences should have two parts to them. This is why they're tricky to write, right? They have one, a topic or a focus, like what the point is that you're writing about, right? And two, a controlling idea to direct your reader's understanding, like where are you going to go, right? All that can be communicated if you write a good topic sentence in one or two sentences, right? So let's take a look at a couple of examples. Okay, I think sometimes for this particular issue, topic sentences, seeing examples actually is more helpful than actually kind of me talking abstractly about them. Okay, so for each topic sentence that I'm going to introduce, try to figure out one, what is the focus or the point that the author is making in the body paragraph, and then the controlling the specific like direction or idea, like where are they going to go next? Okay. So let's try a couple of examples. So how about this one? So air pollution in Mexico City is the worst in the world for a number of reasons. So if this is your topic sentence, okay, so first of all, what's the point that this author is trying to make? Like, what's the focus here? Air pollution, right? Air pollution in Mexico City, right? Exactly, good point. So what do you expect if this is the topic sentence and the focus is air pollution in Mexico City being the worst in the world? What do you expect the rest of this paragraph to do or to say based on this topic sentence? Any ideas? So if this is your topic sentence, right? If the focus is air pollution in Mexico City is the worst in the world, what do you expect the rest of the body paragraph to do or to say? Yeah, evidence for why it's the worst in the world, right? It starts giving reasons or examples of that, right? Exactly, right? Now notice you did a lot with one very short, simple sentence. And that's exactly what you want to be doing or trying to do with any topic sentence that you craft, right? Be thinking ahead to the point you're trying to make, okay? Let's try another example. Fixing a flat tire on a bicycle is easy if you follow these steps. So if this is a topic sentence that you have, what is the focus? What's the point of this particular body paragraph? Yeah, fixing a flat tire on a bike. So Pono injustice. Yeah, exactly. Right. So what if this is the topic sentence and the focus is fixing a flat tire on a bike? What do you expect the rest of the paragraph to do or to say? Yeah, the steps. Exactly. The steps involved with fixing a flat tire on a bike, right? Exactly. Great. Ooh, let's skip down to the last one. Let's skip over number 3. Let's go to the effective leadership. So effective leadership requires specific qualities that anyone can develop. So this will be the last example that we run through. If this is your topic sentence, what's the focus? What point is the author trying to make if this is your topic sentence? Effective leadership requires specific qualities that anyone can develop. What's the focus here? Yeah, effective leadership, exactly, right? So what do you expect the rest of the paragraph to do or to say if this is your topic sentence? Yeah, a list of qualities, exactly, right. Good. So here's the thing. It's kind of easy when we do these examples, right? But the real trick is for you to do it on your own when you're writing your own papers, which means that you kind of have to have an idea about what you want to say ahead of time. So this is why, so kind of circling back to the whole idea about outlining, if you can just do like a quick outline, you generally have an idea about what you need to say in each body paragraph. You can see what point you need to make, right? I'll say this because what's pretty common when, I like I said, I never used to outline. But what tends to happen when you don't outline, you just kind of like come up to ideas as they occur to you. They're not real linear. And sometimes those ideas like aren't the best. So it's better to spend a little bit of time just coming up with ideas and organizing them and figuring out like what it is you need to say in each place. And it's kind of like, connect the dots. You lay down the dots first, and then you connect them with words and sentences, right? If you try to do both at the same time and you just compose as you go, you're more likely to be all over the map, right? So that's why just a little bit of time up front saves you a lot of time later. Okay, So one more kind of thing that I kind of want to point you to, and this is a slightly more sophisticated technique of writing, but I think it's very important. Okay, and I think all of you are totally capable of kind of using this, right? It's this issue about complication. Okay, now in the examples that I'm going to give you an example of an outline. You don't need to know anything about the actual examples. They're going to be talking about Central and Eastern Europe and about this thing called a triadic nexus. You don't need to know any of that stuff. You don't need background in any of that, okay? So let me just show you. Okay, so look, you don't need to know anything about this thesis. You can assume the thesis is argumentative, but what I really want to focus you on are the body paragraphs. Okay, A, B, C, and D. Does anybody notice any pattern with those 4 body paragraphs as they're being outlined here, right? Any pattern or anything that you're noticing? Yeah, so Bennett says, like, right, well, Pono says it's a listing of different countries, and then Bennett says it's a product of a triadic nexus. Exactly, right? Here's the thing. If you're not careful, this frequently will happen if you don't outline, right? You'll get something, just a bunch of list of examples, right? Weimar Germany is a product of a triadic nexus. Czechoslovakia is a product of the triadic nexus. Latvia is a product of the triadic nexus. Serbia is a product of the triadic nexus. It's basically the same thing, saying the same thing over and over, but using different examples. That's what will frequently happen if you don't outline, right? And if you're not careful about what it is that you're saying ahead of time, you could easily lapse into this. Okay, so one of the things I think is important to do, and it's a little bit different. I've noticed this in like composition classes. Body paragraphs are not just sites for information dump, right? Just don't think about body paragraphs as just rattling off more and more evidence. Think about subclaims that you're making in each body paragraph. And ideally, they should be different, right? So one of the problems then is that it looks very flat. It looks like, and it looks repetitive, right? When you kind of state the same thing, but with different examples. So you want to try and avoid that, right? Now, this is a lot of text. Don't worry about it. Don't read it all right now, right? You really want to be thinking about complicating your ideas, complicating your thesis in each body paragraph, right? So don't just look at it as a place to dump evidence. Think about what position or claim you're making in each of the body paragraphs, right? So the way that I kind of think about it is this. The analogy I give is like a visual one. It's like, think about it as, like a spiral staircase, right? That's ideally like what you would want to be trying to kind of, the kind of model you want to be striving for. So like a spiral staircase, it has like a central core, but at each step or rung of the staircase, you're in a different position, right? So that way, if you're, for each body paragraph, you're not just saying the same thing over and over with different evidence, but you're actually you're helping your audience understand the issue more thoroughly. You're taking up a slightly different issue, but all related to your thesis, okay? It makes your paper look more well-rounded and more thoughtfully considered. And because of that, it's more persuasive, right? So let's take a look at how an author kind of tries to incorporate this idea of complication in each of the body paragraphs. So we have basically the same thesis, or very similar. Well, actually, the thesis is a little bit tweaked, right? The one part that's added here is this however part, right? Conflicts also emerge from factors other than the triadic nexus. So you can take a look. Already the slide continues on to another slide here, but this idea continues on to another slide. But you can already see how the body paragraphs start looking a little bit different just for this first body paragraph, right? National conflicts can be attributed to Brubaker's triadic nexus, and then you're given different reasons, right? You can break it down more specifically, like nationalizing states, national minorities, external national homelands, right? So for example, but take a look at this. national conflicts can also be attributed to issues beside the triadic nexus. So now you're given other reasons, right? More complicated reasons, the demise of multi-ethnic empires, the partitioning of states after World War II, the collapse of communism, right? So that's ideally something that you would want to strive for, right? Just don't say the same thing over and over, using different examples. Like really try to figure out like how you can take your essay in a new and different direction, right? But all still related to your thesis, okay? If you slow down, if you give yourself time to process, to think about your paper and plan, right? It's much easier to do it. It's harder when you're trying to write and compose and come up with ideas at the same time. So that's why I would recommend outlining first. Just get your ideas down. And that way it's a lot less stressful, right? Then it's like you're setting down the dots and then you connect the dots when you start writing, okay? Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna recap now. So we're kind of toward the end of the presentation. So before searching for evidence for your paper, right, think about like what it is that you're writing about, right? So first of all, if it's not clear to you about what your writing assignment is, ask your instructor. Make sure that if you're being asked to produce like some kind of take a position, right, or write an argument, right, you're taking a stance on a topic, right, that you're going to have to prove or disprove with evidence. So try to avoid a thesis that is either a statement of opinion, right, or a statement of fact, right, because that's going to lead you to a dead end. You can't really prove effectively either of those, right? Those are the two pitfalls that we discussed earlier, right? So just remember that there are different types of evidence, and different types of evidence are going to be appropriate for the discipline that you're writing in. So, for example, if you're writing a paper, especially for research papers in particular, if you're not sure what constitutes like appropriate evidence in your field for discipline, ask your instructor, right? Like it's a little bit weird, but I've seen it done. But in literature, for example, when I teach, it's going to be odd to come up with like quantitative data. I mean, people do it sometimes, but it's just not generally what we do. And same thing, if you're in like a biology class, I mean, you can provide some qualitative evidence, but generally you're going to be kind of expected to produce more quantitative evidence, right? Especially in physical sciences. Use topic sentences. Again, key, like next to like what is a thesis or what's an argument, it's something that you can argue for or against. Topic sentences are key, right? Remember to use them to announce the focus or the point of your body paragraph, like the claim that you're making. That means you need to have a claim, an actual argument as your topic sentence. So starting off with like a summary is a bad idea because it doesn't tell your audience like what it is that you plan to discuss. And the idea too, topic sentences, right? They make connection between the paper's claim and the evidence you will provide. Like, where are you going to go next? Right, as we talked about. Also think about complications in your paper, right? How you can complicate your thesis rather than merely list evidence, right? That's the kind of last thing that we talked about. So to do that, useful to outline first, right? That way you can see what it is that you're actually saying before you actually write it out. And think about it too, because I've done this before. You write a lot, you didn't really outline, but you write a lot. And once you set it down on paper, you're really kind of low to really throw it out, right? Because you've done all that work. If you outline first, you can see the traps that you might be falling into, and then it's less work, right? Then you can just craft just rewrite the part of that outline, and then you know what you need to say, right? Because I've been there where, for example, I'll give you an example, a concrete example. Like I wrote, an honors thesis at UH where I did my undergraduate work. It was 90 pages. And after I did a first draft and I found out, and my thesis advisor and I discussed it, and I kind of wrote myself into a corner and took up an issue part, halfway, about 3/4 of the way through, that couldn't be actually supported. So I ended up canning about, almost the full 90 pages and rewriting the thing. if I had outlined first, I could have saved myself a whole lot of time and effort, right? So I know it's people like think about outlines from when they're like in intermediate or high school and they just dread doing that. But it really, because we're all busy, right? We all got work or, other personal lives, other things that we want to get to and need to get to. So it actually, the whole idea about outlining really saves you time. It's a time saver rather than a time waster.